G'day gymnastics skill seekers, welcome back to another training vlog. We move into phase 3 of 2023. So it's a new week, a new phase, a new day. We're going to talk about day 1 today. In day 1, I'm continuing to work on my pike flexibility, and I'm also working on the bent arm strength, which is the handstand push-up or the hollow back press, as well as some backwards roll practice. So let's get stuck in and have a look at how day 1 went. So I'm starting the session with the pike flexibility, and at the end of last phase, I had some sort of high hamstring strain or some tightness, some stiffness, a little bit of pain, especially in the deep forward folding. So the head to toe stuff and some of the pancake stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to rest some of that and work around it, do other movements that are going to help improve the forward fold, the pike flexibility, but hopefully not cause any more issues with the hamstring. So we're starting with some supine leg lift block crushes. The idea of this is to start to strengthen the hip flexor more so it can use that muscle to help pull us deeper into that forward fold, closing the angle between the belly and the thigh. So lying down on the floor, bending one leg, putting it on the floor, and using the other leg, keeping it straight, lifting it up and trying to crush this yoga block between the belly and the thigh. I'd like to see my hip flexion greater than the angle that it is right now, but this is where I'm at right now, so maybe it is a sign that the hip flexors are weak and they need to be strengthened. I'd like to be able to get that leg a lot closer to my torso, but let's train it. Let's see where we can get to over the next 6 weeks. What I'm doing is I'm doing 3 repetitions of 10-second isometric crushing of the block. So keeping the leg straight as I can, just sort of actively trying to close that angle and crush that block between the thigh and the belly. Hold for 10 seconds, rest, hold for 10 seconds, rest, hold for 10 seconds, switch sides and repeat. That's being supersetted with a supine leg lift mechanical advantage. So I take the yoga block out now, and then what I'm doing is I'm actually just doing leg lifts. So keeping the leg straight and actively trying to use the hip flexors and lift the leg as high as I possibly can. Again, closing that angle between the thigh and the torso. So it's called a mechanical advantage because when we think about it, when I'm lifting the leg off the floor, yes, I'm going against gravity. But when it gets to that 90 degrees, well, gravity's not really doing much. The leg's stacked up. As I go past that 90 degrees, well, now gravity's assisting me. It's helping me close that angle by bringing the foot down towards my head in that sort of sense. If I was doing these in a seated position, so we think about our seated pike leg lifts or our seated pike straddle leg lifts, I'm not using a mechanical advantage here. I'm going against gravity, okay? So that makes the exercise a lot harder. So I should have better hip flexion when I'm lying on my back and doing this leg than I should have when I'm seated or when I'm standing and I'm trying to lift the leg. And that's the idea of this. Also, by doing it lying, we're trying to isolate more of the hip flexor and take out some of the abdominals here. So when I'm doing seated leg lifts, I'm pushing into the ground. So I'm using the abdominals to help with the leg lift in that sort of sense. When I'm lying down on the ground, it's a little bit different. So yeah, okay, I can contract the abdominals and push my lower back in the ground and sort of set that little bit of posterior pelvic tilt. But the actual lifting of the leg and the controlling and bringing the leg closer to me is going to be more isolation in the hip flexors. So that's the idea about doing this sort of supine. So with the mechanical advantage leg lifts, it's doing 6 to 8 reps, and this sort of like a pause at the top, but it's an active pause of, just trying to close that angle a little bit more. I feel that, this needs work. So it's going to be interesting to see how this block goes in increasing that hip flexor strength. 3 rounds of each exercise, and they're my A's. Moving into the B's, we're doing a half calf raise. So for those of you who've been listening, I really feel a lot of, stretching, the pike stretching in my calves. So I'm not getting a deep hamstring stretch. The calves are definitely tight. So we've just been trying to loosen that layer up a little bit more to help me get deeper into the forward fold. So we're still using the half calf raise. We're doing 10 repetitions, and there's a 3-second pause at the bottom of each repetition. And then on the 10th repetition, we're holding for 15 seconds. Actively trying to contract the tibialis anterior, the muscles on the front of the shin, to pull the ankle into more dorsiflexion and sink the heel down even more. So just getting a good stretch on that calf is what we're after. I've only got, my heaviest dumbbell is a 12.5 kilo, so I'm using that. The next step up I've got is a 24 kilo dumbbell, so that's sort of a big step. Might have a play with that, see how I go. Otherwise, I might have to think of a clever way to load this exercise if I want to continue to progress with it just a little bit. But the main focus is the stretch and just hanging out in that pause, so we'll see how this goes. I'm supersetting that with a split stance RDL with the ball of the foot elevated. So the idea here is, okay, yeah, it's a posterior chain dominant exercise. We're working on the range of motion here, getting a good stretch, but I'm also working the concentric phase and getting some blood flow into the hamstring. It's not deep hip flexion for me. Like when I'm working my head to toe, I'm going into a much deeper range, and that's when I start to feel the hamstring strain. When with this exercise, maybe on the first set I feel a little bit of tightness there, but after that it's warmed up, it's got good blood flow, and I don't feel it at all. So this is going to be a little bit of a rehab exercise. At the same time, the idea to elevate the foot is to increase the stretch on the calf. So we're using this to help stretch the calf a little bit more. The foot elevated will put the ankle into dorsiflexion, but we need to be careful that we're not pushing the hips back too far. If I sit the hips back, then I'm actually opening the angle between the front of the shin and the top of the foot. So I'm not putting the ankle into more dorsiflexion, I'm actually decreasing that angle, and that takes away the stretch on the calf. So I need to lean the shoulders forward as far as I can. I need to bring the front of the shin towards the top of the foot, so that increases ankle dorsiflexion and helps to stretch the calf even more. That's what we're working on. I've got the 12.5 kilo dumbbells in this one. My aim is to try and maintain a flat back, as flat as I can, and touch the dumbbells to the floor. I could increase the range of motion here, maybe standing on an elevated surface, but I just don't want to push the hamstring too much right now. Loading this again without heavier dumbbells might be a bit tricky, just because of the leg being in the way with the barbell and stuff like that, the weight's hitting the floor. So I'll probably just stick with this weight and use this exercise as more of a recovery sort of process, and we'll see what happens. But that's the flexibility for today. It's just those 4 exercises. The split stance RDL is just doing 10 repetitions. The half calf raise was also 10 repetitions, but a 15-second hold at the end of that one. And then after I've done the Pike flexibility, I move into the gymnastic strength for the day. So before I jump into the strength part, I always do a warm up. Okay, so I've done the flexibility stuff. Yeah, the body is warm, but I've got a daily dozen that I do. Now, this daily dozen, I spoke about this in VLOG-18. It's just a warm-up process that we can follow, and we're choosing different exercises that are going to help us progress towards our gymnastic strength goals. So in my warm-up, I've got things like a hollow body hold, I've got some butcher block, which is shoulder flexion stretching, some pull-ups, some handstand push-ups, some gymnastics push-ups, a load of scapular work. So I'm not going to give you a demonstration of all the exercises, because what I do is I do this warm-up every day that I'm doing my gymnastic strength training. So 3 days a week, this warm-up is exactly the same, and I just run through all of these exercises once as a way to get in some extra volume and as a way to maintain strength in a lot of variety, a lot of different movements, straight arm movements, horizontal pulling movements, bent arm movements, horizontal pressing movements. It's just a variety of stuff there to keep the body conditioned for the gymnastic strength stuff. From there, we move into the handstand push-up goal. And in this phase, what we're doing is we're actually going to use 3 different exercises to work towards building strength for the handstand push-up. The idea is we're going to start with an easy exercise, and then we're going to progress to a harder exercise, and then to a harder exercise. Now, the theory behind this is like when we go to the gym, and let's say today's a 1RM back squat day. You walk in the gym and you don't put your 1RM weight on the bar for the first set. You gradually want to build up. So you start light, you're doing multiple sets, and you're building to that 1RM for the day. Now, what this does is every day when we're walking around, our body doesn't activate all of its muscle fibers. It's trying to be efficient. It's trying to conserve energy. So it only activates the muscle fibers that it needs to be able to walk around, to be able to sit down, to be able to do whatever activity it is you're doing. We step into the gym and we start to do weights training, and the body goes, oh, this is heavy. I better switch on more muscle fibers. So it recruits more muscle motor units, and it activates more muscle fibers to step up the intensity of the work that we're going to be doing. So that's why we start light with our back squat. We add a little bit more weight, switch on more muscle fibers. Rest, add a bit more weight, switch on more muscle fibers. And we keep going for multiple sets until we get to a point where we're doing, that 1RM for the day. So in gymnastics or in bodyweight training, we can do the same thing. We start with an exercise that's relatively easy. We do a few sets of this. Then we move to an exercise that's a little bit harder. Same motor pattern. So if it's a horizontal press, it's a horizontal press. And then we move to another exercise that, again, is even harder. So we're building up and activating more muscle fibers so that the harder exercise feels a little bit easier. Recruits more muscle fibers, allows us to get stronger, helps with hypertrophy. There are lots of benefits around doing this style of training. So where am I starting? So I've got 3 exercises. They're an A1, a B1, and a C1. So we're doing 3 sets of a deep pike push-up. So I'm elevating the feet on a 30-inch box plus just a yoga block there to put a soft surface under the feet, holding that pike position, doing it on the P-bars so I can go past the parallel point. I'm going as deep as I can in that handstand push-up position with this pike press. Working on controlling the eccentric nice and slow, keeping the elbows tucked in, good form, and then pushing all the way to the top, elevating the shoulders, opening that shoulder angle, holding the best pike I can. It's good that today is pike flexibility because that helps me get into a better position with this pike push-up. Could it be better? Yes, there's some work to do here, but it's helping me to activate those muscle fibers. So I'm doing 3 sets of 5 repetitions here. I don't want to work to complete fatigue. I just want to work to a point where I'm activating those fibers and helping switch them on for the next exercise. So then I'm moving into an eccentric deep handstand push-up. So what I'm doing now is I'm kicking up into handstand, holding that hollow body shape. Yes, it needs a little bit of work. Got to get a little bit tighter with that. And then just slowly controlling the eccentric handstand push-up. Again, on the P-bars, again, going as deep as I possibly can. The more time under tension here, the better. So over the weeks ahead, I'm going to try to slow this down even more. All right. So we're doing 3 sets of 2 reps. So I'm kicking up, lowering down, 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds rest between reps, then kicking up and doing the next one. Resting, 60 seconds to 2 minutes and then going through a total of 3 sets here. So this exercise is harder than the deep pike push-ups, now the eccentric handstand push-ups. The final one I'm doing is just an eccentric hollow back press. So in the last phase, I was doing this in more of a straddle. I'd kick up to handstand, open the legs into straddle, control it down, and then come into that horizontal position with the body leaning the shoulders forward, bit of a bent arm planche position. So now the progression is to keep the feet together, maintain the hollow body shape, lower down to the bottom of the handstand push-up, and then lower the legs and get the torso parallel to the floor and leaning the shoulders forward. So again, this bent arm planche position. It's just 2 sets of 1 repetition here. I've got some work to do with this one. I want to be able to get the body a little bit more horizontal than this, but at the moment it's looking pretty good. It's feeling strong. So I like this little journey that we're on. I really like these 3 exercises and the process here. I can see where we're going with this, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this progresses over the 6 weeks ahead. The handstand push-up form or my vertical pressing strength has definitely been getting stronger, and I've noticed that. So this again is a good opportunity to keep progressing with that and moving closer to that goal of the handstand push-up and in the future the full hollow back press. From there, we move into the backwards roll. So we're continuing to work with this sort of L-sit position, sitting on the floor, pulling, kipping through, landing in the bottom of the push-up with the feet elevated on the box, and then pressing to the top of the front leaning rest or the high plank, whatever you want to call it. Now, in the past, when I've been doing this, I've been focusing on sitting on the floor in this L-sit, doing an L-sit sort of chin up, so pulling as high as I can in the L-sit, then doing the roll, then doing the kip. And some weeks I would nail every rep, and then other weeks I'd really struggle just to get 1 rep. So it's very sort of hit and miss. And I was like, what's going on? How can I not be getting this? Why can't I be having some consistency with this? So chatting to my gymnastics strength coach, his suggestion was to change the technique. So instead of doing the L-sit pull-up, try to think of it more like a front lever row. So instead of the torso being vertical, we want to lean the torso back more horizontal and do the pull in that position and the kip at the same time. So instead of separating it, doing the L-sit pull-up, the roll and the kip, bring it all together. Can I do a pull and a kip at the same time? So it's increasing the total force production. So that was the goal with this session and today. So before I went into it, what I did is I did an exercise that we've done in the past. It's an inverted kip to support. So I'm just practicing that kipping action. Kipping and pulling at the same time really is what it is. So we're going from that inverted position, we're kipping and we're rolling to the bottom of the dip here, catching, and then we're pushing to the top of support. Now this roll is different. This is more of a forward roll. It's not a backwards roll, but the technique for the pull and the kip is the same as what I'm going to use in the backwards roll. So even though this exercise wasn't part of the program, I just put it in there just to sort of get the feel for it, to remind myself what this has to feel like. And then I went into this exercise with the idea of this. Okay, I've got to go lean the torso back, do this sort of, front lever row and kip at the same time. And this felt so much easier. Like every time I just sort of nailed it and I caught it in a much stronger position. The previous technique, I would sort of feel this sort of grey part. I'd be doing the pull and then I'd be kipping and then it'd just be like hoping, am I going to catch it? Am I going to catch it? It was sort of unknown. Am I going to get there? But with this technique, I just felt there was constant tension on the rings. I could keep the rings closer to my body and the catch just felt a lot easier. It wasn't as deep as it was before. It was a bit of a higher catch. So this technique has just changed the whole thing and made me just feel, oh, that's so much easier. So I'm going to keep practicing this for the next sort of 6 weeks. I will be putting in that inverted kip to support before I do this, just to practice it, remind myself of that movement pattern. And I look forward to seeing how this goes in the next phase, hopefully when we start to practice like the full backwards roll. Yeah, it's a good feeling to be able to switch up the technique and find an easier way to do it. It's nice to have a coach that can, give you this insight or give you this sort of sense of direction. Otherwise, I'd maybe just keep heading down the wrong path. It wouldn't quite understand this technique and progress, the way I want to progress with this. The kip and the pull could be a little bit higher, like my hips get above the rings, my shoulders just get above the rings. I'm catching it, but if I could get a little bit higher in that kip and catch just a little bit higher, it would be a little bit better and more chance of success in the actual backwards roll in the future. So that's something I'm going to work on, just the timing and just getting a little bit more power in that backwards roll. So that's day 1, the pike flexibility, the handstand push-up goal, and the backwards roll. Feeling pretty good about this session, really enjoy it, loving the handstand push-up stuff, loving the backwards roll stuff, and just feel like I'm making good progress at the moment. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this vlog. I think I'm up to number 18 now, how quickly time flies. In the next couple of weeks, we're getting ready to do a house swap. So we're going to be driving from Queensland, northern part of Australia, all the way down to South Australia. It's roughly 4,000 kilometers we're going to do. We're going to break it up and stay with friends and family to make it a few weeks traveling down, not just trying to knock it out all at once. So yeah, going to be packing up the gym, putting it in a trailer, going to be packing my gym kit, trying to keep up my training as we travel there, just seeing how it goes. So yeah, be training in a few different locations, hopefully be able to stay on top of the vlog and on top of all my work stuff. But yeah, we'll just sort of see how we go with it. So another week before we leave. So next week's vlog will be, or next 2 weeks, the vlog will be pretty much still at home. But then after that, let's see how we go on the road. So again, yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you find these vlogs interesting. Any feedback, any comments, feel free to leave them below and I will get back to you. Until next time, happy training.